Having voted on March 2nd, 2020, majority of the Guyanese people would have never imagined they would have been in a situation where they'll be on the streets battling, watching ballot boxes, just to ensure that their votes are accurately counted and accurately reflected, or the will of the people are accurately reflected. There has been quite a number of developments politically over the past few weeks in our country. I have with me in studio here to continue our discussions Ms. Priya Manickchand, former Minister and Member of Parliament, and of course a candidate for the People's Progressive Party, and Ms. Gail Teixeira, former Minister, former Chief Whip of the PPP, of the Parliamentary Opposition, and of course she's also a candidate of the PPP-C. Clearly, as you can see, the name of tonight's program, Democracy Under Threat, I think most Guyanese would have already come to that conclusion. Ladies, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Eddy.
I want to give you, before I get into the meat of our discussions, because one of the things we have to do is to try to bring clarity and to correct the misinformation that is being circulated and being spread by the coalition and some of its operatives. But I'm going to give you first an opportunity to make some opening comments in terms of what has been happening in our country.
Right. So Eddy, as everybody knows, we went to the polls on March 2nd, which was 18 days ago, more than 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago. And people expected that in 2020 Guyana, especially with our history of rigged elections and so much pain and destruction that came from those rigged elections, that we were a country that had moved on from that, and that we'd go to the polls and people would vote. And yes, there may be some people unhappy with who won and who lost and so on, but that we would have a government sworn in. It's 18 days later and that has not happened, and that has not happened not because we can't have a government sworn in, that has not happened because this country has seen unfold before it, and the world has seen unfold before her very eyes, the very ugly, unholy collusion between operatives at the Guyana Elections Commission and the AP and UAFC, one of the parties that contested the elections, and some other persons like high up in the police force. I mean, and that collusion has seen very many different efforts at taking the election. Not even, I mean, this was not even a rig. A rig is stuffing ballot boxes and so on. This is just taking an election and saying a party won, when everybody knows and everybody has seen that that is not what happened. And so the attempt to actually declare the elections and get Mr. Granger from the AP and UAFC sworn in was blocked about 4 or 5 times over the last 18 days. It's very, very, very rocky 18 days for our country. A very depressing time, a very worrying time, a time where we never thought we'd come back to it, that would stay in the pages of our history book. But I've also seen in this time some beauty rising up, and that is the people of this country, young people, older people, and their friends around the world insisting that nobody is going to steal democracy from us, that we are not going to allow a political party or a constitutional body like GCOM or anybody else or a combination of them take from us what is ours, which is our right to elect a government. And so the beauty you see rising up is people from every religion, every gender, and every age group, and people who voted and are saying in their posts and in their comments, I voted for the AP and UAFC, but you have to count people's votes. We cannot win this election like this. And for me, that's a reminder to the universe, that's a reminder to us as a people that this world is not going to ever accept dictatorship and oppression without resisting it strongly, without facing down bullyism. And for me, that's the beauty that has come out of all this. I live in great hope that this country, whether it's tomorrow or next week or next month or 2 months down the line, we are going to see democracy prevail in Guyana. And we're going to see that not because the PPP is great and the PPP is powerful, all of that may be true, but we're going to see that because the large majority of Guyanese people and people in the world will simply not allow any political party or political party in GCOM or combination to take our rights from us. And that for me is very pleasing.
All right, Gail.
I want to go back a little bit further than that, and I want to support what Priya is saying, and that is that the struggle and the pro-democracy forces of this country really have grown over the last 14 months and 3 weeks. Because it started from the no confidence motion, where I think the government felt that they could easily ignore the no confidence motion. They went to court, they did everything they could to stop it. They had the house-to-house registration. They tried to create a list that would be inflated. They then were forced again by judicial intervention to then go back to the claims and objections. So we've been on a long road, and in it what has been exposed is the very undemocratic nature of the APNU AFC cabal that was running this country. But even with that, and even with the whole 14 months, that people's eyes, I think, were opening more and more, and recognizing that this government was willing to stay in power despite the right of the people to have elections and to vote for their representatives. What I think people still were in disbelief on March the 4th, when everything started unraveling. It started from the 3rd into the 4th of March. What we have seen, and the success that we must be proud of, as Priya said, is that the coup plotters and those who are involved within the government circles and the cabal, the APNU, AFC, PNC cabal, with GCOM, if the democratic forces in this country, the PPPC and many of the opposition parties, civil society, we've had various spokespersons speaking out, that if we were not vigilant then, March the 4th would have led to March the 5th and the declaration of the results, and done deal. Mr. Granger would have been sworn in. And I think that we can be proud as a people that despite the fact they've been tried and tested for 14 months and 3 weeks, that what in fact is happening is the pro-democracy forces in our country getting broader and stronger and not weakened. And I believe that those in GCOM who are collaborating with those in the APNU AFC believe that on March the 4th they could have walked through, they would have succeeded, nothing would have happened, and they have been proved wrong. And from then on, everything they've tried to do to block it, we've been able, in a broad way, not just the People's Progressive Party, but with other forces, to be able to countermand that and to prevent them from going further. And so for many of our people, they're saying, let's get this thing over with, and why can't we get the results, and just let's get back to life normally. They're right in a sense, but if we go the way that APNU AFC wants us to go, is just declare the results of a fake statements of poll and a fake declaration of March the 4th and March the 13th, then yes, you will have back to some form of normalcy, but you would have lost our democracy. We would be living in an illegal, with an illegal government in place, and with a government that has no recognition internationally. And so I think that we have to feel very encouraged and strong as a people, that a whole generation of young people grew up under the People's Progressive Party when we restored democracy in '92. And that root, the root that has been planted is after 20 odd years, showing that it's coming to fruition, and the younger generation in particular is saying, no, this is not going to happen. We're not going to lose our democratic rights. We're not going to allow anybody to do this to us and impose a government on us, which we have not elected freely and fairly. And so I think that as they say in Creole, one dirty bill down, we have been building a movement in defense of democracy over the many months. As I said, my projection is 14 months and 3 weeks in particular, but in the last 3 weeks it has got stronger and more outspoken and more courageous than, say, before March the 2nd.
And one of the things that is heartening is the fact that when you look at the number of young people who are making that sacrifice to come out and to defend democracy. And these are people, like you rightly said, who grew up under the PPP, who never really had a taste of the ANC dictatorship, and they had just 4.5 years, and I think that they would have woken them up to realize that, this is what our parents and grandparents were telling us, this is what we read in books and so forth, and we are seeing it for ourselves now. But in the midst of all of this, all of the attempts to steal the elections, the attempts to have fraudulent declarations and so forth, the coalition by itself has been creating some narratives. It's a very, very misleading and fake narrative to try to steer the conversation, to justify all their actions. And one of them that they have been pushing a lot is that of spreadsheets being used in other regions. Could we explain this more so that the viewing public gets it?
So you have two good guests here, Eddy. For this reason, both Gail and I worked in other regions on election night, as well as the nights after election, the days and nights following. And I will say with absolute certainty that is absolute nonsense. This is something created by the AP and UAFC, and I see Roxanne Myers saying that, and she is absolutely wrong. This is the DC, the Deputy Chief Election Officer, GCOM. She has no clue what she's talking about if that's what she says. So I worked at Region 3, and let me tell you what happened. In Region 3, elections were held on the 2nd. By 11 o'clock on the night of the 2nd, the tabulation began. That is, everybody went there with their statements of poll, and the RO started calling. And so the RO was using statement of poll, that is holding up the statement of poll and saying the PPP gets so much, the APNU got so much, so many voters voted, this is the total number of voters at the place, and so on. We sat there with our statements and we were going through it. The APNU said they were tired or something and they left. It was rescheduled to start the next day. It started the next day at 1 o'clock, a little bit after 1 because they didn't come. And there was a spreadsheet there, but we did not use it and the RO did not use it. The RO is the returning officer. What happened is he held up his statement of poll. We held up our statement of poll. We sat down and we ticked off each as we went along. That was done in the presence of all the observers. I remember distinctly, they had the Carter Center there, they had the Commonwealth group there, and they had local observers there. They also had other political parties there. The URP particularly was present, and the PRP was present at different occasions. So everybody in the room knows that nobody used spreadsheets. What happened at the end of it all, they had two persons in the room employed by GCOM, two boys, who were, as the RO was calling, was ensuring that what they had entered into their system was what it was. So they used a spreadsheet. They did populate a spreadsheet, but they did it from the numbers that came from the statements of poll. So let us put this to rest right now. In regions 1 to 10, save 4, what was used was the statement of poll. After they used that, they might have sat down. Some places who didn't have computer probably sat down with a paper and pencil and added up how much it all was. And people who had computers entered it into a computer. But the numbers that they entered into that computer came from the statements of poll. That's it. No, nothing else was used.
So simply I think they're trying to switch the narrative to say that you're using a statement of spreadsheet to generate the final information, but based on what you're explaining there, is that whatever is called from the statements of poll, so in some instances persons would have entered that on a spreadsheet.
But I wouldn't even get confused with the APNU narrative. It is a very simple thing. Where something happened in the place of poll, every polling station on election day, people went in there and they marked their X next to the cup, or they marked their X next to the palm and the key, or they marked their X next to the cell phone. That happened in the place of poll. The only record that exists about what happened in that polling place is the statement of poll or the ballot itself. So you can't use anything else. So there was simply nobody could use anything else to determine what happened in there. No other document exists. So it's not about whether people use a statement of poll or use the spreadsheet. It is where did the information originate from? Because if you take this information and you put it on a spreadsheet and it's accurate, nobody's going to complain about it. If the RO of Region 4 was using a spreadsheet that had numbers on it that we had on our statement of all, we wouldn't have said boo, because we don't care what you use once you use the statement of poll as the document of origin that will show what happened in the polling place. Justice George, in her decision, Roxanne George, the Chief Justice acting, said very clearly that the document that is posted outside of the polling place in a conspicuous place, which is the statement of poll, is conclusive evidence of what happened inside the polling place, except we go to the ballot and there's a recount. We go back to get a recount. That is it. That's what you have to use, nothing else. So let us put that to bed once and for all. There can be nothing else you use simply because there is no other document that knows what happened in there. The presiding officer is not coming to give the information, and even if she did, you won't remember it out of your head. So the only thing any returning officer could possibly use is the statement of poll. Anything else would be you making up numbers.
Not clearly. I mean, all the observer teams, the OAS, the EU, the Commonwealth, have all commented on this, including post-Chief Justice ruling that this was thrown out the window. I mean, for Region 7, it was the same thing. The RO there tried to bring in the spreadsheet with numbers already on it, and there was a bit of a tussle on that thing. But anyway, eventually it turned out that he had to go back to the statements of poll, and there was a clerk there who was typing in the numbers as they were read, and then when those numbers were finished, then they went back and rechecked it to make sure that he hadn't made mistakes, and then they were signed. So, but I think why Ms. Myers is doing this, and it is part of the PNC, UPNO, AFC, attempt to confuse people, is that she's trying to really hide the fact that here was a returning officer in violation of a court order, in violation of the Chief Justice ruling, and therefore trying to cover it up and to say, well, this happened elsewhere, to justify it. But clearly, that didn't hold water and doesn't hold water and has not convinced anybody. In Region 7, the EU sat in and saw all of this. In Priya's area, she had other observers. So, and we know from other regions this happened as well. So that this is totally fallacious, an attempt to cover up what has been clearly been, as Priya talked earlier about, the stealing, the thievery, the hijacking of the electoral process and hijacking of an entire election by the GCOM and the UPNO AFC.
But I mean, if one is to look at, let's take all the arguments that are being put forward with spreadsheet used in all the regions and so on. While you've clarified that, let's take all of those arguments. The PPP has made clear its position that it's supportive of a total recount, which will put to rest whether spreadsheets were used or not.
This is not even an issue anymore. If you say, first of all, the PPP is the only party that has a problem with the numbers being called who has put up its spreadsheets, its statements of poll. The PNC, the APNU, the AFC, they're saying, oh, those are not the numbers, but they haven't put up their statements. GCOM is saying, we have numbers, and we're calling out these numbers, but they haven't shown this nation how they arrived at their numbers. Right. Any way you look at it, Eddy, whether they're right or we're wrong, or we're right or they're wrong, nobody trusts this system anymore. And so the only way to have a credible result is to get into those boxes and see what happened. This country is facing a health crisis like the rest of the world. We need to move on. We need to have a government that is legitimate in place, which we do not have right now. This country is running on auto. We don't have a government in place that could make sensible decisions and lawful decisions. We don't have a government that people trust. So you need now to move on so that we could deal with the business of developing Guyana and much more than, that very cliche thing, we can deal with this very present health crisis that the world is facing. The only way to do that is to get in the box. Let's get in the box. Let's spend a couple of hours. Let's count these votes and determine who won these elections. Whoever wins when you go in the box wins. You get sworn in, and the next party will spend the next 5 years fighting to show why they're a better option. That is how democracies work. And we're prepared to live with the results of whatever come out of that box once the boxes aren't interfered with. We've said that before. So the only people who are resistant to that is GCOM and the APNU. Every other political party that contested these elections want to go into the box and have a recount. The international partners that we have and observers that we have are fully supportive of a recount. The only people who don't want to do a recount are the people who said they won, the APNU AFC. They want to win, but they don't want to show us how they won.
It's also GCOM.
And GCOM doesn't want to show us how they're saying the APNU won. So the two people, that's why I said there's enough evidence for this nation to conclude that there's a collusion between the Guyana Elections Commission and the APNU AFC.
Okay.
Well, one of the things, before we go off of that, the OAS statement of March the 13th, to deal with the point you're making, describe what happened at the when the returning officer used the spreadsheet, etc. But it said, to date, neither the chief elections officer nor APNU have challenged the authenticity of the statements of poll published by the People's Progressive Party Civic by producing the copies in their possession. The implications are deeply troubling and make it at all the more necessary for the returning officer to display the statements of poll on which he is relying. And so again, they conclude, as a number of the other observer missions, the legitimacy of any government that is installed in these circumstances will be open to question. This would be a terrible blow to the country's democracy. The people of Guyana do not deserve this. And so in this case, that in all the observer missions, they're pointing to this particular issue and saying that this is the issue that has to be confronted. There has to be a recount. And obviously GCOM doesn't want a recount either, because then it will expose where did these fake statements of poll come from, where did the ballot, spreadsheet come from. They do not want to go into the ballots, and that is what we need to do as a country. We all want to get off of this roller coaster we're on, but we can't compromise ourselves. We've got to go through this rather torturous process, and it's not of our making. It's the making of the coup plotters. It's the making of those who want to hijack the democratic will of the people of this country. And even persons who support the APNU and who have voted for the APNU, they have rights too for their votes to be counted as well. It's not just those of PPP or of other political parties. And so the fact that CARICOM came in here, the fact that CARICOM sent a high-level team, etc., and this has all been blown up in our faces, because GCOM, under which there are 3 people appointed by Granger, are the ones who questioned, where's the agreement? First of all, there must be a written agreement, signed agreement between the president and the opposition. And then having done that, in the interim, while you have this delay, they rush to the court for an injunction to stop any recount or any amendment of the results as of declared by the returning officers. So in other words, and stopping GCOM from having a recount, stopping the agreement between the president and the opposition. And this is done by an APNU candidate who was a local government candidate in the 2018 elections. This is, I understand that in the court, Roysdale Ford said he was representing APNU, and he had to be reminded by the judge that APNU wasn't a party to the proceedings. And then he came back later on in the afternoon to say he was representing Ms. Moore, who is the person who's brought the matter to court. So that this now is a further delay, because they're talking about Wednesday now that the case is being
It's not
heard.
even a delay, it's ugly. It is ugly because what you have is Mr. Granger, David Granger, the presidential candidate of the APNU AFC, who himself said to Mia Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados and the chair of CARICOM, that he doesn't believe these results are transparent. The result that was declared was not transparent, was what he used. And that he wants to be sworn in based on transparent results, as a result of which he asked her to send a team here to have a recount. What we have now is Granger and Jagdeo and CARICOM agreed to a recount.
Right.
Granger, Jagdeo and CARICOM, the Caribbean community, agreed to do a recount. Granger's candidate then goes with his known lawyer and says to the court, I don't want my presidential candidate to do a recount that he agreed to because I think it's unlawful. And so really, to me, this is just a horrid conspiracy that is not even subtle. So he says on it without one side of his mouth, I want to do a recount because the results are not transparent. At least he conceded that the results were not arrived at in a transparent manner. When he agrees to something, his candidate goes and says, but we don't want, I am APNU and I'm taking APNU to court so that APNU's presidential candidate cannot do what APNU's presidential candidate agreed with Gail and the Caribbean community to do. Do you understand how convoluted and ugly that is? It is horrible. It is, I don't know how he could ever be trusted again, not only in Guyana, but around the Caribbean, amongst other leaders. People expect to sit in a room with a president whose word they can take. Not when he leaves that room, he might come out the room and say something else and throw the whole region into trouble because of his double speak. And so to me, that is reprehensible. They need to decide what they're going to do and say it.
And I think also it exposes what exactly is the agenda. It shows clearly that Mr. Granger just wanted to give the impression to separate himself, to distance himself from what is happening at GCOM and what his party is involved in. I think that is his objective.
Well, I don't know what Mr. Granger's objective is, but I can tell you this. The latest statement coming from Mr. Michael Kozak, who is the Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere, says this: GCOM has the responsibility, and that was at 3:37 p.m. today. GCOM has a responsibility to ensure that all votes in Guyana are counted. Any announced result that does not reflect a credible vote count and the will of the Guyanese people will damage the Guyanese government's standing in the international community. A day ago, the Secretary of State, Mr. Mike Pompeo, actually said this: they have moved on from who's to blame, so Granger had better get with that program. They're not talking about who's to blame. They're saying anyone who benefits from the fraudulent election announcement result announcement. If you benefit from it, so you could sit down at Pearl up there and sing all you want. That is not me, it's GCOM doing this. And believe that the rest of the world is so insipid that we're going to believe you had nothing to do with this. Well, Eddy, it's like this. If Gail is repeatedly bringing to me a bangle, and when she's bringing to me this bangle, they have a set of people over there hollering, thief, thief, Gail, thief the bangle. And they're bringing it to my attention. And cameras are videoing Gail thiefing this bangle and giving it to me. And ambassadors are watching Gail thiefing that bangle and giving it to me. And I still take the bangle, then I will suffer for taking that bangle because I have full knowledge that she stole the bangle. It's the same thing with the votes. You can no longer say, oh, GCOM is independent, GCOM could do what they want, and understand when the whole world watch as GCOM stole an election and they're attempting to give it to the APNU. If the US is saying very clearly, if you benefit from that, whoever benefits from a declaration from this flawed and fraudulent process will suffer serious consequences. Serious consequences. And I'm not sure if they want to risk that. We'll find out.
But if I could, I know you spoke a little about the OAS statement. And there was a statement from the Commonwealth. And I probably share 2 or 3 pieces before we have some discussions on this. And this is what was said in the statement. I quote, "It is the clear and considered view of the group," that is the Commonwealth group of observers, "that the tabulation processes conducted by the returning officer of Region 4, Mr. Mago, were not credible, transparent, and inclusive." And this has to do with not allowing persons to view the statements of poll and so forth. They also said a series of events that the group observed in the tabulation of Region 4 results between March 3 and 14 are of grave concern. They went on to highlight the process being stopped repeatedly and they said for a variety of irregular reasons that they themselves probably could not really comprehend. They talked about when the process was being impeded repeatedly by GCOM, So this also is another example to what you mentioned, and the observer groups would have highlighted repeatedly what has been happening in terms of why the process was being stymied. I have another piece here I wanted to share with you before.
Well, the process wasn't being stymied. I want to be very clear about that. Look, because I see the AP and you have very quickly on their page this afternoon after the Carter Center issued their report. What did the Carter Center say? The Carter Center said that there was some chaos because they had a lot of people in the room, and the PPP's representatives were allowed in preventing a declaration and protesting a declaration. And Eddy, we make no apologies for that.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you, the Carter Center's report also goes on to say that the declaration of that result, of those results on both occasions, were happening when the votes had not been tabulated, when the numbers had not been tabulated. So it follows that that was the protest. So let me tell you what happened. Mr. Mingo was about to declare results when 60% of the tabulated votes had not been.
That's the direct quote from to what you speak from the. So maybe you should share it with the public. The direct quote.
So the AP and the Carter Center said today that there were some disruptions when Mr. Mingo was trying to declare the results. Now let me explain why. Gail can read that. Let me explain why. Mr. Mingo was attempting to declare results for the AP and UAFC twice. We now know that he did it, and give them votes that they never got. Mr. Mingo was about to declare results when he had not finished tabulating more than 60% of the statements of poll and the numbers in those statements. In the same Carter Center report, it specifically says that Mr. Mingo's tabulation came, Mr. Mingo's declaration came when the tabulation had not been completed. So yes, we did protest, not only the PPP, all the other parties in there protested. People were aghast, some people were speechless, and some people who caught themselves in time said, no, you can't do this. And you heard shouts of no, no, no. That's what was coming when he was standing on the balcony, because he was attempting to declare, and did so in fact declare, results for the AP and UAFC that they never got, in effect giving them an election that they never won. The Commonwealth expands a little bit on that, on the Carter Center report, and the Commonwealth said very clearly that at no point, because the narrative of the AP and UAFC is that Mr. Mingo had to run off in a corner and sit down and plan up with Mr. Lowenfield and or Roxanne Myers and or Valda Lawrence and or whoever else, and come up with these numbers because the PPP was disrupting the process. That was absolutely untrue. For 421 boxes out of 789 boxes, 879 boxes, for 421 of those, there was not a murmur from the PPP because Mr. Mingo was using his statements of poll, and once he was using those, it matched our numbers. It matched our numbers because we have the same statement of poll he has, because it's a carbon copy.
Yeah.
It is when he started trying to put in numbers that the AP and you did not get that we started making objections. And let me say very clearly, there were 5 loud objections. 5. The first one happened when there was a protest about the statement of poll not being used, because by that time the spreadsheet had been used, and out of 21 boxes that were called, 17 had numbers that were seriously inflated for the APNU, and miraculously the PPP got lower numbers than they actually got reflected on the genuine statement of poll. So that was the first disruption. It was not a disruption to stop a process, it was a disruption to say you got to go back to the statement of poll. The second disruption was when the gentleman, you remember the flash drive story?
Yeah.
When he left the room with a flash drive and we found him manipulating a computer, we now know why. They were populating a spreadsheet and trying to fix numbers. And when he came back into the room with the police and all that and stuck the flash drive into the computer, what came up on the screen is not what we were working on when he left. So we knew that he was manipulating numbers. So that was the second loud objection. The third one was when Mingo was about to read the declaration. So he had already decided that he was going to make a declaration. So we didn't stop any process, any tabulation process. That was when the declaration was about to be made. The third one was when he was actually reading the declaration, the fourth one. So there was no stopping of the tabulation, so he had to run off and do it. That's when we were trying to stop him from declaring without tabulating. And the fifth one was when there was an ambulance, I think Chairperson Claudette Singh, either her or her driver or someone on her behalf or something, called for the ambulance. And the medics people came, the EMT people came with stretchers and everything. They went up to her and the police would not let her in. And then someone came and said, someone totally unrelated to this process came and said, she called him and said she wasn't feeling well. And we felt, everybody in the building felt, look, if Claudette Singh wants to hide in a room, that's her prerogative, we'll deal with that separately. But if she's sick and she's in need of help, as a matter of a humanitarian intervention, you have to let these EMT people go in. That was the last objection. So the point I'm making, there were 5 loud objections. 3 had nothing to do with him standing there and trying to tabulate. 3 was he had already either make the announcement or he was about to make the announcement, and the other 2 we make no apologies for, because Eddy, it was stopping the democratic process from being derailed. You cannot allow an RO or anybody, when you put people through the charade, it would be a charade of having an election and then you just stand up and give it to someone else. So that was the noise. But the Commonwealth group has said very clearly, we were present all the time, and at no point did we see a disruption that stopped tabulation to justify what Mr. Mingo did, which is to just declare results that the APNU never got.
Before I come to you, Mr. Shearer, I'm seeing here at 7:17 p.m. the European Union Observer Mission also released a statement, and just a quick excerpt from it. It says, our election observer mission calls to complete the electoral process in a credible and transparent way. The European Union remains engaged in Guyana and firmly determined to support all efforts to this end. Only credible and transparent counting can produce legitimate results. And this was released tonight. They have also withdrew their observer mission from Guyana.
Yeah, well, in fact, there's no observer mission here at all now. European Union observer mission left today. Carter Center is leaving in the next day. Commonwealth left CARICOM and the OAS, so that all the observer missions have left, except Carter Center saying that if the process resumes, it is willing to return to Guyana. But I want to go back to the statement that was done by Mr. Kozak, where he talks about GCOM's responsibility. All of what's going on could be stopped very quickly and very clearly if the chairperson in GCOM plays the role and plays the constitutional role and defends the constitution of this country. One, you have an RO who has disobeyed the court on 2 occasions, has declared on 2 occasions. There's nothing to stop the GCOM commissioners, headed by the chairman, of removing that person completely from the process. The ROs are not permanent jobs. They're not permanent positions. So here's a person who's openly violating all the basic procedures and the laws to do with elections. And GCOM sits there like a pussycat, like a toothless poodle, not allowing it. So by its silence, by its allowing, it's complicit with hijacking of the election from us. So there's nothing to stop Madam Chair from having the RO removed, or any RO. In fact, I've heard that DROs are being terminated and they're going to get their salaries or whatever. So why can't the RO be replaced and removed completely, and a person that is put that obviously preferably is honorable? The other issue is, why can't the Madam Chairman made the commitment to the court of the undertaking, she gave the court an undertaking to do with the recount. There is nothing to stop GCOM from being able to decide that. Why was all this delays to do with an agreement and a written agreement and going to legal officers to determine when Claudette Singh herself, as the judge that dealt with the case in 1997, knows very well that a recount was allowed and CARICOM did come in post-97. I see Ram Detan also talking in response to Joe Singh and talking a lot of nonsense and also distorting elections completely, what happened. He's trying to make a comparison between 1997 elections and these. They're chalk and cheese. First of all, the 1997 elections were observed by observers. They were found to be free and fair, and that the elections themselves were not challenged. What was challenged was the use of the voter ID card, which the entire parliament, PNC and PPP, supported. Because of the behavior of the PNC, there was an opposition and lost the elections. Afterwards, there were a number of court cases, including a lot of violence on the streets. A lot of people were hurt and injured, and CARICOM came in and did an audit of all the ballots, of the procedures, of the SOPs, etc. In this case, we haven't completed the elections. We're incomplete, and what CARICOM was being called in to do was to complete it, to have a recount of Region 4, and as President Granger said, he had difficulties with other regions. That's the first time you hear about it. Then Mr. Jagdeo agreed to all 10 regions. The fact that the chairman of GCOM must know about what happened in 97, must know that in 2001 there was also another recount before any election petition. So this whole view that you have
So
to
the
wait
recount
for
is
election
mandatory.
petition.
The recount is a right. A recount, and Justice George said it, and the courts will have to say it. It's not, nobody's doing you a favor.
No.
When a first recount is asked for, it has to be granted. Just so we ask for a recount in Region 4, the PPPC, as well as every single other contesting party except the APNU asked for a recount in Region 4. Claudette Singh undertook, which is as good as an order, to the Chief Justice twice, 2 times in 2 different courts, that she was going to give a recount in Region 4. Claudette Singh, in a release she made, said she undertook that to the Chief Justice. So it's not Priya saying that. The Madam Chairperson herself is saying she gave an undertaking. This court proceedings, the injunctions don't stop a recount of Region 4. It stops a national recount pursuant to a CARICOM agreement, because they're saying that's extra ultra-virus and so on. But it doesn't stop Claudette Singh from doing what she undertook to do. And she needs to wake up and start being the person we all thought she would be when she was appointed. This has become a runaway train. It's a wreck, and you're taking the whole country down with them as they dither for a way forward.
We are almost out of time, but I wanted to raise 2 other issues. One, we've seen today the movement of the containers containing the ballot boxes from the conference center back to, I understand, the GCOM headquarters, and I understand the political parties were not told about this. Maybe this is an indication that maybe Mr. Granger is thinking about taking oath of office and to form a government, which obviously will be an illegal, illegitimate government. How do we move forward from here if that is to happen?
I don't know how Mr. Granger is going to get sworn in and stand up with his Bible and take an oath when he, on results, based on results that he himself said twice are not transparent. He said that when he called Mia Motley, and Miss Motley put out a statement saying Mr. Granger called her, this decent, honorable man called her and said he wants to recount because these results are not transparent. And he said the second time, when he released a statement saying how disappointed he was that his candidates had chased the CARICOM high-level team out of the country, he said that he's disappointed because now there's no transparent resolution of the matter. So I don't know how he's going to get sworn on results that he himself says are not transparent. But the party has made it very clear, and I think the world has made it very clear, anyone who gets sworn in on results that were arrived at through the process we just discussed for the last hour would not be credible, would not be legitimate. They would be squatters, they would be usurpers, they would be people who are scorned by the international community. The PPP is going to treat him as though he is not a legitimate president. We're not going to recognize him. We're not going to be going to the National Assembly. In no way will he be recognized. Mr. Granger was accorded all the courtesies and respect because he, for all intents and purposes, he won the 2015 election. We have a matter in court about that, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's say he won them. And so he was treated like the president of this country. But he cannot take these elections in this manner without a credible vote, without transparency in the tabulation of the ballots and the SOPs, and then expect to be treated like a president. But it's not only us, Eddy. The world has spoken on this matter. We have the UK, the Canadians, the US, Norway, France, CARICOM, the EU, the UN, just about the Commonwealth, just about everybody has said that this is not transparent, it will not credible results, and the only thing that would make it credible would be the recount. But they've gone further, and they have said Mr. Granger must refuse to be sworn in on the basis of these results. They've gone that far.
Well, my view is that the UPNO AFC led by Granger has gone so far down the road in 3 weeks. They've had all the pressure and all the opinions and positions of the observer missions in other countries and other NGOs, and have still continued up to today to try to find a way to hijack the elections. And therefore, first of all, my own opinion is that Mr. Granger has had umpteen opportunities to show that he's an honourable man. And he has not shown that. He has shown a person who, in my mind, this is my view, he's the mastermind behind all of this. I don't buy anymore this view that has been propagated and churned out by the spin doctors of the NCN and the government that he's the honourable one and there's these forces around him. I believe that he's the mastermind of what's going on, and I do believe that they're capable of much worse. And I think that that is why the democratic forces, those who want to defend the democracy and to make sure that our elections are not hijacked, will have to continue to be vigilant at every step. So like today, when they started moving the ballot boxes, and no party was told within an extraordinary short period of time, all the different representatives and their monitors and cars and everything were able to get out into action and to follow to see where these the containers were going, and to set up mechanisms tonight to continue the monitoring. And I'm using as an example that we have to be on the ball and vigilant every single hour, every single day until we come to the end of this issue. And the end of it would be that there's a recount and that the legitimate government is sworn in. That is the end game. Mr. Granger's supporters have had 3 weeks to psychologically, emotionally come to terms with the fact that they lost the elections. And despite all the manipulation of their own spin doctors to tell them otherwise, the majority of them know that it was lost. It is the cabal at the top that is holding on desperately for power. And that's why I'm saying this thing ain't over yet. It's not over yet. And yes, I would hope that there are sanctions and that the international community is able to start revoking visas for all those who have benefited, all those who have been part of this hijacking and really what I call electoral coup. Some of us have called it that, before we come to the end of this story. And of course there are issues of sanctions. But this government, in 3 weeks, I have seen, in the past, governments buckle under the kind of pressure this government's come under, internally and externally. And therefore it cannot be that it is totally insensitive to these pressures. It's just saying, to hell with that. We're gonna ramrod through what we want and let the consequences fall where they may. It is highly irresponsible, it's highly reckless, but what other kind of conclusion can you come to? There have been all these intercessions to be able to change that and to give him a safe face, face-saving opportunity, which is what Maya Motley and the CARICOM did. And his second overture to them, where he called them himself. So I don't think, one, that he is at the mercy of anybody, and I think that he is the mastermind behind what is going on. Otherwise, he could very well, if it was so, there were these forces that were preventing him and the cabal and stuff like that. He could very well, as Joe Singh said, call the dogs of war off. Joe Singh called on him. He knows, we know the powers of the president. And in this case, where there are no ministers anymore after March the 2nd, it is one person and one person alone who has a constitutional authority, and that is Granger. So there's powers within his capacity to rectify this. There are powers in the GCOM with the chairman and the commissions to stop this. And therefore, the fact that neither one of them are stopping it has to be that they're in conspiracy with each other.
Listen, the girl who filed the action, and I concede everybody has a right to file anything, and so we're not talking about whether she has a right to do it. She's working with the minister. She is an APNU candidate, and she's represented by Royce Ford, an APNU candidate. There's nobody on this good green earth that could tell me that Mr. Granger has these two minions, very low-level people, running around making decisions for his political party and his presidency.
And to undermine the agreement he made.
And he makes an agreement, and they're going to do the opposite, and he doesn't say, oh hello, come. Unfile this thing, withdraw this thing. That is what we know would happen. So if it is continuing, it is because he wants it to continue. Let us understand that and wrap our heads around it. The other thing, Eddy, quickly, that I wanted to raise is the issue of people saying the PPP said they won Region 4. We never said we won Region 4. So let me be very, very clear. The PPP did not win Region 4. The PPP did not win Region 4, even with the use of the statements of poll that are generated by GCOM. The PPP did not win Region 4 based on what the people in the polling places went into the polling stations and did. The APNU AFC won Region 4. What GCOM did, because what happened by the time they tabulated on the 5th, all of the other regions, Region 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, had already been declared, and what was left was Region 4. The APNU needed, the APNU needed 50-something thousand votes. I think 52 or 56. Don't hold me to the figure.
52,000 more.
An advance of they needed 53,000 votes to win the election. They did not get 53,000 votes in Region 4. They got 33,000 votes in Region 4. The complaint we're making is that GCOM did not give them 33,000 votes. GCOM gave them 58,000 votes so that they could, when you tabulate the whole thing, they will win the general elections all over the country. So let me be very clear. We're not dishonest. We're not saying we won Region 4. We didn't. The APNU AFC would have won Region 4 if they count the votes the way people voted. We're saying, though, that GCOM gave them 58,000 votes when they really only got 33,000 votes. And with that amount of votes, it will give them the entire election, make them win the presidency, which is what they're claiming now. So let's just understand that clearly.
Yeah, so I probably let you, because I know the spin doctors are going to jump on that. They
already have. That's
53,000 more than the PPP.
More than the PPP. So let me be very clear. I'm not sure if it's 53 or 54. I'm saying what the number that the GCOM gave to the APNU is far more inflated than what they got. What they actually got at the place of poll. The particular point I'm trying to make is that we did not win Region 4. And we are not claiming that we won Region 4. What we are saying is that the number of votes they got in Region 4 will see them losing the elections by at least 2 seats in the National Assembly.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Closing comments, because I think supporters of the PPP and Guyanese at large are eager to hear what's the next step. These somehow are hanging in a balance in terms of answers. So I give you your closing comments or what you want to say to the people who are looking forward for a defense of our democracy.
I say you're on the right track. Anybody who is defending looking at the ballot boxes and insisting that we get a recount and insisting that we cannot move forward and be business as usual until we get a democratic resolution to this matter you're fighting a righteous cause. I saw something lovely today. A group of young people of their own volition made t-shirts that said Guardians of Democracy at the front, and at the back I think it had We Stand Together. I haven't seen them in person as yet. I've seen them on Facebook. That is what we need. I believe firmly that good overcomes evil every single time. It doesn't happen on the same day we'd like it to happen, but fights are never, righteous fights may not always be conveniently packaged in a timely way. And so we have to stick with it. For me, it is much, much bigger than who won the election. Look, Eddy, I went to this election and I did everything I was asked by the party to do, save for 1 or 2 assignments. But my position was, if we win the election, fantastic, because we have a really great program to unroll and unfold in this country that would really see every single group having a far better life. But if we didn't win the election, then we would fight again for 5 years and try to persuade people that we're the better option. That is what a democracy is. So it's not about who wins the election or who loses the election. This fight is much, much bigger. This is a fight that says if you don't fight this now, you can never, ever, you are giving up for the rest of your life the right you have to choose a government. And here's the problem with when governments take over, when political parties assume office in a dictatorial manner. As soon as they do that, a whole set of other rights will start getting eroded. This freedom you have to say what you want on Facebook and to criticize and to be healthy in your constructive conversations and so on, that will have to be shut down because they will be so much on the wrong side. You won't be able to say anything about your government. A lot of freedoms will go. We saw this before in Guyana. We walked that path before. We cannot do it again. We will stand together and we will be the guardians of Guyana's democracy. And particularly and importantly, we're not alone. We are not alone in this battle. In this struggle, we have the entire world save none. Not a single other person stands with the AP and UAFC. The AP and UAFC the two of them are standing alone. And even from their coalition, they have fragments. Dominic Gaskin, the president's son-in-law, has come forward and said, I don't believe Region 4 was properly done. I don't think results that are declared from that will be credible. The Justice for All party has stepped forward and said there must be a transparent count of the Region 4 ballot immediately. I cannot support someone who's sworn in on that result, and whoever is sworn in on the recount will get my support. So even from their own groups and support, they're standing alone in this. We, on the other hand, are standing together as Guyanese, and we're standing with company from across the world. And so it's a good place to be in. We will prevail in this fight. So let's stick with it. I have every hope that democracy is going to prevail here.
Yeah.
But probably to take off on the same line is that we have, as a people, Guyanese, regardless of our political affiliation, regardless of our ethnicity, gender, etc., we have showed a capacity in the last 3 weeks and a power that I think we haven't even recognized that we had amongst us to withstand and to prevent several attempts at electoral coup in this country. Several attempts to hijack the votes of the people and the will of the people and to install an illegal government. And this is an achievement despite all that has happened, all the difficulties, all the emotional distress that people have gone through and the tiredness and how much longer this can go on. That this is a major, major achievement for democracy in our country to show its resilience and the way in which it has taken root in our society. And so we are going to be tested over the next few days, maybe even over the next few weeks. This battle and this struggle isn't over yet. But what we're clear about is that probably for the first time in a long time, we've seen the forces that want democracy and do not want to go down the road which Priya is describing, of a limitation of your freedoms, of your rights, the freedom of the press, the freedom of assembly. And don't forget, they brought in cybercrime laws that include sedition, that you can be brought back the sedition law, which was removed by the PPP and what was part of the Burnham era, the anti-terrorism law, which talks about the death penalty 14 times in that act. These are the laws they brought in, which are anti-democratic and undemocratic. So they have created a legal framework, also bringing in legislation that is not democratic at all. And so we have to recognize that there is a lot at stake here, not just the election results, but if we have to be strong and to continue to be strong, because what is at stake is not just who gets into government, as Priya said, it's what happens afterwards. What are the repercussions on our country and our people, our children, the next generation? If these people in this cabal is so power drunk and power hungry that they are willing to do what they've done thus far, then we have to make sure that we're strong to make sure that they don't succeed at all. And therefore, I'm saying to Guyanese to continue to be vigilant, to continue to be strong, to lend your support in whatever way possible. There are persons in the senior leadership who are busy doing many things, but there are also the many thousands of people at the grassroots level who are helping those who are watching the ballot boxes and bringing food and juice and water. There are others who are helping people with transportation. There are others who are sending messages to each other and keeping people informed. There are layers upon layers of people who are involved in this, who many of them are not seen, not that you wouldn't know about. The fact that the Roman Catholic bishops of the whole Caribbean came out today in an extremely strong statement, reminiscent of the 1970s and 80s, is an extremely big step for the Roman Catholic Church to make. And we're hoping that the Anglican Church in Guyana and abroad is able to take such a courageous position. But I'm just giving that as an example. They were not alone, and the forces get stronger and larger amongst us. And so we mustn't be afraid, we mustn't get despondent. We must stay strong and be able to hold each other up, particularly as we're facing an additional issue, and that is the coronavirus, and the fact that we know that the Ministry of Public Health is unprepared to deal with this. They have done nothing over the last few months to prepare our country for this. And we will, as citizens, take care of each other and help each other and make sure that we're able to get through this double kind of whammy that Guyana is being confronted with. And I believe we can be, and we can be positive, and we can do it. But we have to stay strong and vigilant, and to make sure that any attempt to move rapidly forward this weekend or next week into installing a president that has not come about by a legitimate process, a transparent process, in accordance with our laws, in accordance with our electoral laws, will be stopped. That we will not allow it to go forward.
Thank you very much, Gail Teixeira, Manickchand, for being here with us this evening and to provide at least an update to the nation. I also want to thank you very much for joining us. Do have a good rest of the evening. We will be back here tomorrow evening to continue to keep you updated as to what has been happening. Until then, bye for now.